Life's too short to drive boring cars.
In an ever-increasing automotive landscape, it's critical for the life and success of brands like Mercedes to create cars that are competitive not just at the premium level, but that they also create vehicles that younger buyers and slightly less heeled buyers can actually afford. Vehicles that were equally stylish, full of performance and technology, but don't necessarily cost six figures. It is in fact very exciting for these brands to be coming out with these interesting entry-level models. The unfortunate part in the process in doing such, Mercedes has made these cheap cars fail. Let's get into it now. So in the last few years, the gap has actually tightened up substantially to the point where the average new car price in the United States of America sold for about $33,600. That's the overall average. Did you also know that 40% of luxury car sales sold for under $40,000 as well? So the gap is actually quite tight. And a major reason for that is some of the entry-level models coming out of some of these premium brands. The first example of where Mercedes Benz entered that market, and this starts to tell the story of why these cars in fact are so cheaply made. So let's look back to the beginning of time. Mercedes has always had a lot of success with the C-Class. That's their small to mid-size sedan. Do you remember back to 2001? Now Mercedes wanted to capitalize on the C-Class success and build out something that was even slightly more affordable. And they called it the C-Class Coupe. Or Coupe, just like over here. The C-Class Sport Coupe essentially started around $25,575 and was a very, very affordable offering. Unfortunately, at the time, it lacked some of the amenities that Mercedes-Benz owners traditionally got used to. And sadly, as a result of that, Mercedes decided to discontinue that model after a few short years, even though it had some great sporting intentions. It came with a manual gearbox, you can get a supercharged 4-cylinder engine, and all in all, it was quite a fun little car to drive. BMW actually did the same thing with the 318 Ti, and many other brands even tried it, such as Jaguar when they created the X-Type, which was also known as the Mondeo. But sadly, the C-Class Coupe failed in many ways, not just the lack of amenities and the quality control, but after a few short years, these cars started to rust and appealed to even a smaller audience on the used car market once the repairs started to kick into full gear. And then rolling the hands of time forwards several years into 2014, introduced the CLA 250 as we have right here. Now there was many reasons why the CLA 250 was very popular. It had great lines. I mean, you look at the curves on the sides. It looked very, very sporty. It had the low roof line. It had dual exhaust system there for attractive appearance there. A turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. And it had all-wheel drive as an option as the 4MATIC. Let's also not forget some of the great accents and the alloy wheels that you'd find in these cars too. Now this car is basic, but you could get the oversized glass panel roof, LED marker lights on the mirrors to boot. Circling around, you'll notice the front end looks very, very sporty and stylish, and actually, if not, somewhat aggressive. Another great appearance is the appearance of these stars on the front grille and the oversized Mercedes badge. So what was not to love about these cars? They were very, very affordable at about $29,000 when they came out in 2014. So with all of the amenities and the style, what was not to like about these cars? Well, Mercedes-Benz had to cut costs somewhere. Well, where did the cost cuttings come from? Well, these were manufactured in Hungary for starters. The ride quality is substantial to say the least. As a matter of fact, I would go as far in saying that it actually feels like a Ford Escort wrapped in an International Clothers suit with an Armani badge just stapled onto the front of it. That's right. And as well, even though the exterior was very, very great to look at, very stylish, and almost looks like the bigger brother, the CLS, the interior was less to be awed by. As a matter of fact, the interior of the CLA was very, very Spartan and quite basic, with a very simplistic level of material and fit and finish. And not only that, there was other problems. The pricing actually did start to soar over the years. As I said, it started at 29 grand, but in 2020, now the CLA costs $36,600, so the pricing is slightly less than competitive. Now the A-Class shivs on in there. A-Class now is considered even lower level to the CLA. Now, due to the slow rise in the CLA price, the A-Class now fits in at a $32,800 MSRP. It has now replaced the CLA for entry level, but give it a few years and I think you'll find yet there will be another entry level model that'll go even below that, based on the C or CL class. Now you can actually see how Mercedes is starting to soften up and dilute the brand with these lower level models. Unfortunately, the S-Class and even a beautiful E-Class like this with this amazing grille, The new styled E-Class here is absolutely a thing to behold. Conventional Mercedes style grille, you've got the hood ornament, LED headlights, and yes, they have alloy wheels as well, and a great front nose that makes it look slightly aggressive. Let's not forget about the oversized glass panel that lets a whole lot of light into sitting in the luxury-based cabin, puckered right there. Again, here we have an E-Class, and it's also a 4MATIC. So this is more of what customers of Mercedes have grown to know and love. Surprise, SUVs are now taking over the market share. There's SUVs from every brand, and now brands are starting to figure out it's not just about having a basic SUV. They've got to have a large one, a medium one, a small one. You've got a crossovers this, an SUV that, and you've got to have utilitarianism plugged in there. You have to have tow ratings. You have to have vehicles that do a little bit of everything. It's a utility vehicle. And so here, for example, in addition to the CLA, you have the GLA, which is essentially based on the same chassis. GLA 250 right here is also 4MATIC. You'll notice slightly different exhaust tip finishing, but you've got some of the nice touches like this chrome bumper protector here, some great little flared haunches, and again you have the oversized glass roof to allow a whole abundance of light in for all of the passengers plugged inside this vehicle. You'll notice the styling is a little bit different, and this is perched up more than a CLA, but as I said, this has the same engine, gearbox, as well as the overall chassis is based on the CLA. So Mercedes has a strategy. The idea is provide a low-cost car that entry-level buyers who aren't particularly well-heeled and don't have a large unlimited bankroll to get into a base-level Mercedes. Let them drive for 3 or 4 years and enjoy it. The idea behind that is once they move that vehicle along, the hope is that they will either move on immediately to a new Mercedes, or even after 10 or 15 years elsewhere, they come back because of the familiarity with the particular brand. Now you want some statistics? How about the CLA? Did you realize statistically the average CLA owner is 11 years younger than the average Mercedes owner in general? Did you also know statistically 70% of buyers who buy a CLA are coming from other non-Mercedes related brands? That's right, this vehicle was intended to bring people into the brand. Did you also know statistically 54% of A-Class owners are coming from either a Honda, Toyota, or a Lexus brand? That shows that people are looking for an alternative. And again, statistically, 2/3 of CLA owners move on to another Mercedes. That's a pretty loyal bunch of followers for these particular brands. That's right, the CLA generally leaves a pretty good taste in the mouth of Mercedes owners. Now the unfortunate part with providing all these new vehicles, so you've got the GLA, now there's a GLB, and there's the CLA and A-Class and C-Class, C-Class Coupe, C-Class Sedan. There's so many vehicles that the line is truly blurred. What that starts to do, unfortunately, is it starts to dilute the brand quality or the name. Here's an E-Class. After a while, nobody's looking for an E-Class because it's like every other Mercedes. When you're driving down the road and you spend 100 grand on your car and you see another car beside it and that guy spent $25,000, $30,000 slightly used for his A-Class, it starts to disappoint. And when you see every single car on the road somehow looks like it has the 3-pointed star on it, it becomes a little diluted and a little disappointing. And it feels like you don't have an exclusive vehicle anymore, unfortunately. And also what starts to happen is what happened with the C230. Poor quality parts go in, parts start to break easier. It starts to get nickel and dime, and customers start to get annoyed with that. Let's not forget rust. I mean, obviously the quality of the metals that go into it was poor. The vehicle starts to rust. And of course, that's a disappointing turn of events as well for Mercedes, or any other brand for that matter. Now the problem is Mercedes has to skimp, just like BMW does, just like every brand does, when they come out with a down market car or a price point car. For the sake of bringing in new clientele, there's always going to be cost-cutting measures. I mean, let's talk about a few things about these cars here, the CLA specifically, because it is one of their entry-level vehicles. And that actually is the interior, as I spoke of before, is very, very basic. The dashboard has very basic plastics and finishing, and there's not a whole lot of extra material going on in here to look slick. Look at the brakes on there. Those brakes are nothing better than you'd find in a Toyota Corolla. So essentially, it's not much more than an economy car wrapped under a fancy Mercedes skin. So yes, there are places where they've cut costs, and a lot of it, unfortunately, is buried underneath, whether it's under the engine compartment or underneath the chassis, that you don't see. And those are the things that really bite you in the rump. And let me just start talking about some of the failures that you can just browse through any of the forums, and you can find a whole host of problems popping up already on a relatively new model. Since 2014, there's been lots of different comments on these cars. For example, There's been noted starting issues with some of these vehicles, electrical faults, lights working or not working, ambient lighting failing, or just different things, lights and electronics just failing and stop working altogether. There's also been problems related to the DCT or double clutch transmission, which I personally love the jaggedness and aggressiveness of a DCT, but not everybody's on board with that. There's been some odd behavior by the DCT tucked away under there. Turbo failures, because this is a single turbo 4-cylinder engine, there have been known turbo problems. Cam sensors, coolant leaks, just like right there. And there's also been talk about the front wheels, because this is a 4MATIC, so that means it's all-wheel drive, and you've got a front differential. There's been lots of comments about people having noisy differentials, particularly when you're turning full lock, and even more so when the vehicle's cold. On your first cranking of the wheel, you get a clunk or a strange noise tucked in underneath there. Seems to be elusive, but there's problems evolving there too. So there's drivetrain problems, electric problems, leaks, and all kinds of other miscellaneous things. It doesn't take long to scour the forums to learn that this car doesn't necessarily quite have the same reliability that you'd find in, say, a Lexus IS 300, for example. So ultimately, I personally love the charm of the CLA. I think it's got great style, looks, even the sportiness and the kind of jagged driving abilities sort of appeal to me. It's a bit sporty in my opinion. But if you want something that feels a little bit more Mercedes-like, you're better off spending a few more dollars, step up another 10 grand on top of an A-Class, and you can pick up one of these C300s here, for example. Now these cars are the true C-Class vehicles. There's lots of great things going on with them. And this generation has a lot going for it. They've got the new revised all aluminum rear subframe structure design. They've got a lot of new technology plugged into this chassis. And it's not all just about the looks. Even though you've got nice soft touch handles here, oversized sunroof, great looking LED headlights, and a cool grille to boot. So at the end of the day, when Acura has Honda, and Lexus has Toyota, and Audi has Volkswagen, Mercedes doesn't have that lower level vehicle. So they've got to expand their lineup to try to grab some of that market share. But unfortunately, in doing that, there's been some cost-cutting measures that have resulted in some failures along the way. Overall, they're great vehicles, they're fun to drive, they have the technology, they give you a bit of the essence of the Mercedes brand. But as you would likely expect, it's those very cost-cutting measures and trying to appeal to a lower entry-level marketplace that has caused the problem for the Mercedes brand. And with all of that said, everybody, I'm sure you'd love to see 10 vehicles that won't make 100,000 miles. If you've been shopping, you're sure going to want to check that video out. Hope to see you guys on the flip side. Catch you then. Bye-bye.